Hello and welcome back to the Thecrimereel. For this week's true crime story, we shall be visiting Melbourne, Australia and Bujumbura, Burundi to look at the lives of NOELA RUKONDO and BALENGA KALALA. BALENGA was born in 1976 in the Democratic Republic of Congo in an area close to the Burundian border. He was one of 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls born to local farmers. He was bright and well educated, completed school and went on to obtain a diploma of commerce and management. At the age of 24 he married a girl from his village and together they had a son. Sometime within the following 2 years, a rebel group attacked the village where the young family lived, brutally killing Balenga's wife and their young son. The group attempted to recruit Balenga into their army, but he managed to escape and flee to Botswana, where he spent over a year living in a refugee camp. In 2004 he moved to Australia as a refugee. His parents and siblings all remained in Africa. Balenga settled into life in Australia and found work in local factories and sending money back to Africa to support his family members. In 2004, NOELA RUKONDO also lived in Australia but was originally from Burundi. Both NOELA and Balenga had the same social worker at the resettlement agency who was assigned to help them adjust to life in Australia. As Balenga could speak English and NOELA at the time only spoke Swahili, their social worker introduced them so that Balenga could help NOELA by translating for her. NOELA and Balenga soon became romantically involved and they moved in together in Kings Park in Melbourne. In 2005, they welcomed their first son, followed by another son the following year and then a daughter in 2010. NOELA also had 5 other children from a previous relationship. The couple and the 8 children lived together in their home in Melbourne. On the 21st of January 2015, NOELA travelled from Australia to Bujumbura, the capital of Burundi, to attend the funeral of her stepmother. Balenga remained in Australia to take care of the children. NOELA and Balenga remained in regular contact while she was away. They would often speak over the phone, and on the night of 17th of February 2015, Balenga called NOELA at her hotel in Bujumbura. NOELA was feeling stressed and overwhelmed having attended the funeral and was also complaining about the stifling heat, so Balenga suggested that she went outside for some fresh air to try to clear her head. Once the couple had said their goodbyes, NOELA took Balenga's advice and decided to leave her hotel room, going downstairs and out of the hotel compound. As soon as she opened the gate, she saw a man rushing towards her. He had a gun. He told her not to scream and pushed her into a waiting car containing 2 other men. The following morning, NOELA's brother was becoming increasingly worried when he could not locate his sister. He called Balenga in Australia, who confirmed he had not spoken to NOELA since early the previous evening. Panicking, her brother informed Balenga that he needed money in order to open a police investigation into his sister's disappearance, and Balenga immediately wired $545 Australian to NOELA's brother in order to get the investigation underway as quickly as possible. The investigation went nowhere. It seemed that NOELA had just disappeared without a trace. Back in Australia, the devastated Balenga held a memorial service for his wife at their home in Melbourne. Family and friends from the local community would visit throughout the day, many of them giving both food and money to help the bereaved family. At around 7:30 p.m. on the evening of the memorial service, Balenga escorted a group of mourners from his home out to their car. They had spent several hours at the house with Balenga, supporting him and mourning the loss of his wife. As the mourners drove away, Balenga turned to walk back inside his house and couldn't believe his eyes when he saw NOELA slowly walking towards him. NOELA had arrived back in Melbourne just in time to see the last of the guests, leaving her memorial service, and was ready to tell the story of what had happened to her. So, we will return to the 17th of February 2015, when NOELA had left her hotel in Bujumbura. She was forced into a car at gunpoint and made to sit between 2 men in the back seat. one of whom had a small gun and the other a long one, and they were both pointed at NOELA. As the third man drove away, her face was covered with a scarf. The journey lasted about half an hour, and they arrived at an unknown location. The three men and NOELA entered the building and tied her to a chair. NOELA then remembers one of the men saying, "Go call the boss," and they were eventually joined by a fourth man. Terrified and fearing for her life, NOELA had no idea why she had been taken. She wasn't a rich woman and couldn't understand why anyone would want to harm her. However, her ordeal was about to take an even darker turn. One of the men asked her, "What did you do to this man? Why has this man asked us to kill you?" NOELA had no idea what they meant. "Which man?" she replied. "I don't have a problem with anyone." "Your husband," they replied. NOELA feared that they had mistaken her for someone else. She tells them that they are lying, that they have the wrong person because her husband would never want to kill her. Why would he? They had a life together, children, a home. NOELA was deeply in love with her husband and simply did not understand what was going on. The leader looked at her and told her that she was a fool and that he would call the person who had paid to have her killed. As the telephone call was answered, he simply said, "We already have her." Then NOELA heard her husband's calm reply, "Kill her." Trying to process what she heard, NOELA felt as though her head would explode. She heard the conversation continue with details of where her body would be dumped before she passed out. When NOELA started to come around, feeling certain that she was about to die, the gang leader looked at her and said, "We're not going to kill you. We don't kill women and children." He went on to explain that Balenga had been planning her murder for some time. He had paid the gang the money to have her killed over 3 months earlier. When NOELA visited Burundi for her stepmother's funeral, it gave him the opportunity to put his plan into action. The leader then took the opportunity to call Balenga and tell him the price for the murder had increased. He wanted another 3,400 Australian dollars to complete the killing. Balenga transferred the money, and the gang later told him that NOELA was dead. Balenga expressed his gratitude, even referring to the gang being like family to him. However, after being held captive for over 2 days, the gang released NOELA with a chilling warning. They would give her 80 hours to leave the country. They told her that her husband was very set and determined to end her life, and whilst they would not harm her, they knew of many others who would do so for money. In a twist that would help to seal Balenga's fate, the gang handed NOELA an envelope containing evidence proving Balenga's guilt. A memory card with recordings of phone conversations discussing NOELA's murder and receipts for money transfers made to pay for the crime. The leader told NOELA that they wanted her to go back and warn other women. He criticised that you people get a chance to go overseas for a better life and you use the money to kill each other. Terrified and alone, but driven by determination, NOELA was desperate to get back to Australia. She needed someone who she could trust, so she decided to contact her church pastor, Dosano Haruno Nantogma. As far as people in her neighbourhood were concerned, NOELA was dead. So her pastor was extremely shocked when he heard her voice. This shock deepened further when she begged him not to tell anyone that she was alive, as it was her husband who had tried to have her murdered. With the pastor's help, NOELA arrived back in Melbourne on the evening of 22nd of February 2015, just 5 days after she last spoke to her husband, who had reassuringly suggested to her that she needed some fresh air. NOELA arrived at the home she shared with Balenga just as the last of the mourners were leaving. The memorial service had taken place just 5 days after NOELA's disappearance. The local African community in Melbourne had rallied round to provide support to Balenga after he had told them that NOELA had died in a tragic accident whilst in Burundi. As the last mourners drove away, NOELA approached Balenga. As Balenga saw NOELA walking towards him, his initial shock turned to fear as he realised she knew exactly what he had done. Looking as though he had seen a ghost, he broke down and started sobbing and screaming that he was so sorry for everything. NOELA called the police, who removed Balenga from the property, and a court order was obtained to stop him returning. A couple of days later, on the instruction of police, NOELA called Balenga, who confessed everything and begged NOELA for forgiveness. When Noela asked how he could do this to her, Balenga told her that a mutual acquaintance had informed him that Noela was seeing another man. Despite no evidence, he feared that Noela was going to leave him and was so jealous that he decided he wanted her dead. Fueled by rage, Balenga then asked an associate of his in Burundi to arrange for Noela to be killed. The entire conversation was recorded and provided the final piece of evidence needed to ensure that Balenga paid for his crimes. He was arrested on the 2nd of March 2015. When interviewed by the police, Balenga initially denied everything, but when presented with all of the evidence from the kidnappers and the recordings of his call with Noela, he finally confessed. On 11th December 2015, Balenga pleaded guilty to incitement to murder, the definition of which is where the offender plans to take the victim's life and puts in place steps to achieve this aim. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison with a non-parole period of 6 years. Despite her ordeal and the fact that Noela had never been having an affair, she has been shunned by some people in her local community for speaking against Balenga. She even feels that some people blame her for Balenga's conviction. It is also reported that Noela has suffered greatly after her ordeal, with sleepless nights, loneliness, trouble eating, depression, panic attacks and financial troubles. Even in the face of all these problems, Noela remains a strong and determined woman who has moved to a new area and is steadfast in her drive to rebuild her life with her 8 children. Thanks very much for listening to that story. I hope you found that quite interesting. Please add any comments down below. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Goodbye. I'd like to find out how many people hang around for this last bit of the message. If you hear it this time, can you try and leave somewhere in your comments? Goodbye.